Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Find Your Ancestors session for this afternoon. I'm Katie Stope, the local history librarian at Appleton Public Library. Thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us virtually on Zoom or here at the library. Before we dive in, I just have a couple quick announcements. First, a big thank you to the Friends of the Appleton Public Library for supporting our Find Your Ancestors series. Definitely could not do this without their support. We do host these sessions monthly. So our next session is going to be on Saturday, February 14th, when we're going to have an in-person exclusive presentation with Vicki Tobias. She's going to join us here and discuss what to do with all your personal archives and your genealogy research information. So if you kind of feel like you have way too much stuff and you want to know what to do with that stuff, whether it's physical or digital, you might want to check out that session. Then in March, we'll be hybrid again. You can join us in person or on Zoom on March 14th, when we're going to host Lisa Vogel to discuss how to find your ancestral hometown villages. We also offer a genealogy jumpstart series on select Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Our first session of the year is going to be on Tuesday, January 27th, when we're going to take a look at all the different online repositories that you can find your ancestors in. That is also a hybrid session, and you can check out our events calendar at apl.org, or for those in the library, grab a printed calendar at any of the service desks to learn more about what amazing programs we have coming up. If you've missed any of our past genealogy programs, check out our YouTube channel. Not every presentation is recorded or available indefinitely, but we do have quite a lot of great stuff on there that you can check out. We are recording today's session and we'll post it on Monday for a limited time if you have to miss any part of it. If you have any questions during today's session, our virtual attendees, please use the Q&A box and we'll take those at the end. Just a reminder that recording or sharing any part of this presentation without permission from our speaker is prohibited. Handout materials are copyrighted and only personal use is allowed. Now, without further ado, I'm excited to introduce our speaker today. Today we have Steve Szabados. Steve is a genealogy lecturer and author who has given numerous programs to genealogy societies, libraries, and colleges in Illinois and surrounding states. He has also written over 50 books on genealogy skills and family histories on various branches of his family. He has a passion for genealogy research and wants to share his experiences with others through his programs. He graduated from the University of Illinois and has a master's degree from Northern Illinois University. He is also a genealogy volunteer at the Arlington Heights, Illinois Library. He's a member of the Northwest Suburban Genealogy Society, the Illinois State Genealogical Society, and the Polish Genealogical Society of America. He's also a genealogy columnist for the Polish American Journal. Today he's going to talk to us all about finding Polish roots, and even though the Packers play the Bears this evening, we are not going to hold it against him that he is from Illinois and cheering for the opposite team. So everyone, welcome Steve.
Thanks for having me, Katie. And let's get started. Finding your Polish ancestors may seem impossible. However, focusing on a few simple steps that we'll cover today could solve your puzzle. And I do research in German, Czech, Slovak, Hungarian, and French, and a little English. And to be honest with you, Polish is the easiest to find the records. So that I hope that helps push you up a little bit. Now, this is a family tree of my grandmother, my mom's mother. When I started doing Polish genealogy, I knew her as Anna Zahaski. And if you noticed, I have the name Himalevsky as her surname there. I did not know that. So without that, I could not have done this tree. And this tree actually, for a few of those lines, go one or two generations more into the 1700s. So most of those dates are in the early 1800s, late 1700s. There's a few that go back to the mid to early 1700s also. I was able to find some documentation. So it's not impossible. In fact, I find it kind of easy compared to doing research in other countries. Now, it's just a simple method to find the Polish records. You gotta find their Polish birthplaces. The birthplaces will lead you to the church, and the church is where most of the records were created. But to give you an example, one of the first records I found that for my grandmother that listed a place where she came from was on her marriage application, Andrzejewo, and I also found her naturalization petition, which also had Andrzejewo on it. But if you are lucky to start that way, don't stop when you just find the one, because you need to find as many names as you can so that you can verify that which one of those names or you're in the right area. So for her, on her passenger manifest, gave me two more names, Przicko and Ostrov, and also her brother's name, the brother she was going to live with in the U.S. And looking at his records, I found his passenger manifest, and those records gave me two more names, Przali and Lomja. So now I have five names. And putting that puzzle together on a map, you can see that Lomja and Ostro are large cities. So Lomja was really the name of the district or state, like Illinois or Wisconsin. And Ostro was like being near Chicago or near Milwaukee. And the other three names, Brzezko Brzali was a small village that had a village name that involved two names. So Brzezko Brzali was the name of the village. Didn't have a church. When I looked at Andrzejewo, it had the church. That's where she was baptized. And I would assume that Brzezko Brzali was where she was born, which was true. But the first step, you have to kind of collect what their name was. First, you're going to start with American records. You might get some variation from record to record, maybe nicknames, maybe in some cases you might get a first name or a middle name, because many Europeans also use their middle name. And then you'll start getting into the Polish records, and there'll be another name probably. Polish names and American names will be different, maybe slightly, maybe drastically, especially the given names. We'll talk about that later too. So, what name is correct? Well, don't think of one is being correct and the others are wrong. Basically, they're all right. They just may be a little bit different in spelling. So collect them all and be prepared to use the Polish, Russian, German, or Latin variations when you look for American records and Polish records. Some examples of phonetic spellings might be one of the reasons why, because the clerk didn't really know how to spell the name and he just sounded it out. The immigrants had heavy accents. The clerk interpreted that wrong sometimes. And then many of the immigrants were illiterate and couldn't recognize that he was writing down the wrong name. Some of the examples of that is the Polish spellings that came out Ambrose or Collier or Benedict, all of them with a heavy accent. The clerk would probably Americanize them in some way. The last one was one that I personally had to research. The family was using the name Jubert. The actual pronunciation of that Dziubek was Jubek. Notice that DZI was pronounced like a J, so that's where the Jubert came from. Another would be English translation of the names King, White, Baker, Taylor. All of those are English translations of their Polish or German sounding name. And then shortening. The first one is my son-in-law. They shortened the CHWILKA, which is pronounced Wilka. Notice that the CH is silent. His family spelled it with an H. Other branches of that name dropped the CH totally. And then when you see something written, there may be some endings that in the Polish language are there because of their grammar. Just drop the ending and look at the root word. A good book to verify surnames is William Hoffman's book, Polish Surnames, Origins, and Meanings. It's alphabetically listed by the root, and then he lists various variations with different endings on it. Himmel is a Polish name, but also there's a lot of different endings on that to maybe confuse us. And knowing what the ending for your ancestor is versus seeing other names close to it in Polish registers may mean the difference between finding the correct records for your ancestor or listing many other people that, because of a slight variation in the ending in the Polish records, may not be your ancestors. Now, given names are probably going to be the most confusing because, like in Albert, the Polish name is Wojciech. And same way with Lawrence, that has a very different spelling than the English or the other languages. So know what language, though, be flexible because the language of the record may determine what the given names are, or at least in the records. Another book to reference that is William Hoffman again, First Names of the Polish Commonwealth. I find both of those books by William Hoffman very useful, and when I'm doing Polish research, I probably refer to them almost daily. Oh, while we're here, my grandfather's name is Steve John Zahowski. Notice all the different spellings of Steve. On his birth record, in bold print right above the box that I highlighted there, is CZCZEPAN. That's the name that showed up on his birth record. It confused me a little bit until I looked at Stephen or Stefan in this particular book, and then now I realize what I was actually looking at, one of the Polish spellings of Stephen. Another step before you can go too far into your research is the birth year. An estimate is okay. Don't look for, if you get a birth certificate, that's what you're looking for. So don't expect the numbers to be totally accurate. One person I was researching, I found 6 different documents for her. There was a different year of birth on each one of them, and there was an 8-year range. So she's the extreme, but I finally, knowing the range, I was able to zero in on her record. And the records that I used to look for years of birth are cemetery records, census records, marriage records, naturalization, death records. Those are usually easy to obtain in American records to at least have an idea of when your ancestors were born so that you can use that information to find more records and sort out which records belong to them and which records belong to other people. So the next step is really getting into the heart of finding the birthplaces, the names, the place names. First of all, traditional sources of U.S. records, such as census records, naturalization papers, death records, etc. When all that fails, church records from early Polish parishes also are very helpful, and databases compiled by genealogy and historical societies are also very helpful. Starting with that traditional record, the first one you should look at is all the old family papers that you can put your hand on, especially birth. Well, when I say birth, it came from the old country. That's kind of what you're looking for. But in my particular case, there are instances where you can find birth records that were copies or transcriptions from the original records in Poland that were either carried by the immigrants because of they needed it to get out of the country, or in this case with my grandfather, notice that in the lower right-hand corner is 1959. That's when he obtained this copy because he was preparing to apply for this newfangled program called Medicare. And you had to prove that you were 65 to get Medicare. So when he was 64, he got a copy of his birth record as he was applying for Medicare. But notice also that it is kind of a treasure trove of place names. On the left there, going down, actually the top, kind of scribbled in there is CZYZEWO. That eventually told me where the parish church was. Demochi Cudley is where he was born, and then there's also two other instances where the parish name appears. From that document alone, I could find where he was born on a map. So the rest of it, I probably will be talking about where my grandmother was born. But collecting the family documents, you have to identify a caregiver for the immigrant, the person that cleaned out the house after they died. It was usually an older daughter, a child living with the immigrant, or children of the above. And once you identify who has the documents, like one of my wife's cousins called us up and said he's got documents that we could have, I put off going down to Champaign to get it, and he died in the meantime. So whenever you find out a person with documents, get to them as soon as possible. Either make copies or borrow the copies or take a picture of them. But do it as soon as possible so that they're still around when you knock on the door. Census records. Now, census records don't give you an exact clue of the town, but it does give you an idea of the country or the area where they came from. The name of the Polish partition will probably help you narrow the search area, such as the differences that you may be confused seeing from the 1910 census to the 1920 census, where somebody of Polish descent may be listed as from Poland in the 1920 census, but where did Russia, Germany, and Austria come from? Well, that was the partition in Poland where they were living at the time. Russia or Germany or Austria controlled their area. There was no Poland. But you can also get clues to find other documents, such as passenger lists, naturalization papers, and marriage records. They're the dates that you can calculate from the census records for those, the years where they arrived, the years they became naturalized, and the years they were married will tell you where to look for those documents. And family oral history. We'll go back to the personal documents. Remember about phonetic spellings. So be prepared that what you're hearing and what you see in paperwork written down by other members of the family, not the immigrants, they may be large cities or they may be phonetic spelling, so they'll be misspelled. So be prepared to be very, very flexible at that time using family oral history, especially if it's a large city. Now, marriage license applications, not the certificates. Usually for civil records, counties like to write in, where were you born? So that is a good piece of document to look for. And they usually list towns versus countries, but some county clerks did just write down counties or countries. The sources for these would be online indexes, county recorders, and state health departments. Church marriage records. For Polish immigrants, this is an excellent record because usually the Polish priests in American parishes needed to verify baptism. They didn't need to see the baptismal, but if you said a town where you were born, they accepted the town where you were baptized. Good sources for these would be Family Search and Polish genealogical societies. Naturalization petitions. This is like an application. It's not the certificate. The certificate doesn't have town information, just dates and people's names. And the petitions after 1906 have a lot of details that will be very helpful in finding the location. Passenger manifest, from about 1900 on, the formats grew in the detail that were in the columns on the passenger manifest. So don't ignore any column. They added over time, the columns included last residence, usually where they were born, who they left, and where that person was. Person of destination, well, that doesn't tell you in Poland, but it gives you another person to research. And then in the last column on the later ones, starting about 1907, there was the last column, and it was usually on the second page, not the first page. It was a two-part after 1907. Listed the birthplace, usually with very accurate spellings. Other traditional resources that do give birthplaces would be Social Security applications, not the index, but the application. Military records, especially World War I and World War II, the old man's draft. That usually covers the immigrants. And that usually has a Polish town on it. Employment records, especially pension records. Death certificates occasionally, usually it just has the country or unknown. And obituaries occasionally also. So other resources I mentioned earlier, early Polish parishes in the U.S. and Polish genealogical and historical societies. And in some cases, this is the only place that you will find any reference to a place. And in this example, that was true for the couple here, which is John Swatowski and Margaret Kanowski. That was the only record I found where they were born. And when I looked in the right places in Poland, I found their records and their family. So track down the church records especially. Now, you have a list of names. What are you going to do with it from there? Well, now we have to do a little history lesson and then look at some gazetteers and then old maps. So when I say Polish history, I'm just looking for border changes, because that'll tell us, because of the special situation with the Polish partitions, it'll help you. And here's a generalized map showing the Polish-Lithuanian Union, which started about 1900, or not 1900, 900 AD, covered a lot of area. And then the area listed with the 2 in the middle, the purple outline, that was the Second Republic, which was between World War I and World War II. And then the 3 is the red area, and that's the present-day Poland. Actually, none of those border changes really affect what we're going to be doing, trying to find the Polish birthplace. I just point that out as you don't have to be an extensive Polish historian for this step. What you really need to understand is the partitions, which there were 3 of them, where Austria, Russia, and Germany divvied up Poland. First, they took a little bit, then they took a lot, and then they took the rest. So after 1795, Poland ceased to exist on any European maps. And that was true until 1918, when they became the Second Republic. So understanding who was controlling the area where your ancestors left would narrow your search by 2/3 on what areas to look for where they lived. And it'll help you. And their town names, usually there are towns in multiple places with the same town name. This will help you narrow some of that ground. And now, gazetteers, this is a broad term. It could be online sources like Town Finder, Carton Master, and Wikipedia, or books like the Slavnik. So let's look at them. Jewish Gen has a Town Finder. When I put in the search box Andrzejeva, I come up with 5 different choices. Now I've highlighted in red 2 columns. Column on the right has a description of the location of that town. Now, for my grandmother, I know she was in the Russian partition from census records. So Lithuania would be in the Polish partition. Anything west of Warsaw would not be part of the Russian partition. Anything east of Warsaw would be part of the Russian partition. So I've just narrowed, looking at this, I just narrowed my search from 5 to 3. Now the next column in the middle that I've highlighted is GPS coordinates. Jewish Gen has been very helpful by putting those coordinates in there. All you have to do is just click on that coordinate and it brings up a map. So you can blow the map up or down, enlarge it or shrink it to zero in on the location that they're pointing to in the map. And then you can compare what you see to the list that I had earlier, the 5 names. If any more of them show up on the map, that's probably where your ancestor lived and was born or lived near. And if it only came up with the 1 name, it probably wasn't. So using that, I actually found my grandmother's town on a map. I also found it in the Slavnik by the spelling. And that doesn't tell me where, but in this Polish description, the P stands for Przyszko. And number 7, not 6, but 7 is Przali, was where one of the names on that list. In this description, it's in Polish, but there's 2 other towns, Brzeźko Yachi and Grzymski. Those 2 towns I was able to find on a map. So this was very helpful when you look at the information on this. And Wikipedia. Not all of the town names are in Wikipedia, but most of them are in Poland. And looking at Andrzejewo, it's both a town and a gmina, which is like a township with governing offices in it. And as a gmina, it also gives a list of villages in there. And there's quite a few Brzeźkos in that. Not Przali, but Jachi is. And Grzymki is. I'm pretty sure I'm on the right page. Pushing on the GPS coordinates that I've highlighted in black on the left, we get to a map with showing me where it is and finding all those locations on there. Okay. We can use newer maps, but they may not show the town, but you should try them at first so that you can compare all the names on them out of your list to a map. The older maps will show the older spellings of names also. One older map that I've used a lot is the Australian map circa 1910. This is the homepage. The web address is in the handout. And it's a big grid. The dark green blocks, cells, indicate maps. So you can look at there for the large cities and click on one that would be somewhat in the area that you're looking for. And bring up a map and look for the village that's in your list. Seems a little tedious, but early on, before I found those other sites, or before Wikipedia put all the Polish town names on their website, this was the best method. But it did prove to give me the details that I needed. There's Andrzejewo I've circled, and I've circled Przyczko. Well, that's not a town, that is an area. That was the farm, the manor farm that Przyczki family owned and ran, and all the different heirs over the generations broke it up into smaller parcels that became the town names with their name as the namesake. Okay, I've gone through it very quickly, but now we know what town, where the records are. We know where the church is, because it's not, the records are not going to be cataloged by the name of the village where the person was born. It's going to be cataloged by where the records were created. And since it was created by the Catholic Church in most Polish records, we look for the parish town. So for my grandmother, it was Andrzejewo. And this is a list of, first 4 are the major sites now. And then I'll talk about other sites very briefly once I get through a couple of these majors. Geneteka is the first one I always try. Its homepage is a map. And the listing of the administrative districts that covers that map is on the right. So clicking either on the map for the area or clicking on that list by name takes you, it divides the database that they have into the different administrative districts or states. And this is according to their current map. So you don't have to worry about historical borderlines at this point in time. You know approximately where they were. You know approximately the powiat or the state where they are living or where that village is. So you can click on that and you get to a page like this. It has some boxes. It's in Polish. But the key point is that I start here because I can search by name and I can search by a parish. It's only an index. In some cases, it does have links to the actual record, but not all. The main thing is finding the record listing in the index. Now, go back. I've highlighted a block showing two flags. One is Polish, one is English. So you can choose a language. Here's the English translation. Very clear. And it lets you select the province or state. It'll let you select the parish, or you can select all locations for that province. And then you have a person. The primary person is the first line with surname and first name. You can leave one of those two blank. You can also put in a second name. And then down below in the middle is a search button and a clear button. So know the difference to help, so that you don't clear the information out before you hit search. The other two boxes, from and to, I use occasionally when the list is too long and I want to narrow the year range on my searches. Now, your head is probably getting excited here saying, oh, I can do all this in English. Well, yes, you can, but you may get some confusing results because the town names that you look at the list, if you have the English selection, some of those towns do translate to an English name. So the town that you may be looking for won't turn up because it's automatically been translated to English. So get familiar. In fact, I might do I would recommend doing a screen print of this page. Have it handy when you're doing your research on Genoteca and use the Polish version. It causes less confusing results. And over time, when you're using it over and over and over again, you'll understand what those boxes are for. So in the drop-down menu, you can select all, or you can select the parishes. In my example, I selected all and found this list showing all the different parishes because I didn't know what parish this family was from or this person. In fact, Mary Ann up there that I've highlighted is the one with the 6 different entries, 6 different years, and with an 8-year range. This gave me her birth year as 1856, and it matches because I could see her parents' names there also. And then I also found a lot of her brothers and sisters on the listing from the parish name there. And I could at that point in time, I could narrow my search to just the parish and find all the records for her family. Now, you can see those white boxes there. That's kind of a pop-up. There's a little orange box there, an eye. You can't click on it. You can just use the mouse to hover over it to have that information show up. but hovering over that verified who was that on other records I found out the names that were parents. So that just verified that the record that I was looking at was for the Mary Ann that I was looking for. Always click on that I because it will give you a lot of additional information that'll help you verify that it's the person you're looking for. Now, Matriki is another Polish site. You can't search by name. You have to search by place name, actually by parish name. If I put in that search box that I've highlighted the name of my grandmother's birthplace, Przicko Przali, nothing will come up. But if I put in Andrzejewo, it will show me what group of records I'm looking at. Because if I just press on her province list, we'll come up with a list like this. And you hover over those, in this particular case, 10 different things, and you'll see what parishes are on that list covers. In this particular case, I'm looking for my grandfather's records, and he was baptized in Szczeczew, CzYzew. And you can see from this list that I think there's 4 different mentions of Szczeczew on this, and you match up the year range with each batch of records that you're looking for. If you click on that, you'll get a page like this showing years on the right and then a table on the left there. We'll talk about the table in a second, but you find the year that you're looking for, and then click on the birth, marriage, or death records you're looking for. And in this case, I selected 1859 birth records, which you have to also understand or learn very quickly that the Polish names for the types of records. Urodzenia is birth. I can't pronounce Polish, but you can see there's the U is birth, M is marriage, and Z is death. And you get a page like this after I select 1859 and birth. And this is a grid. Now the numbers there are record numbers. Well, where did I get the record number? Forgot to point that out. You go back to Genoteca where you found the persons in the index, and there's a record number right next to the year, off on the right, left there. The first column is just a sequence number. The next column is the year. The third column is the record number. Always note the record number, write it down, because you're going to go to Matriki. If it doesn't give you a link to the scanned record, you'll need to go to Matriki to find the record. In this case, I get to a page like this and I select the page, because in the second column, the top range says 19 and 21, meaning on that page, if I click on it, I'll see record number 19, 20, and 21. Now, if I don't have the record number and the page has an SKU page at the end, in this particular case, it has 3 pages. SKU is the index pages. If I don't have the record number, I have to look it up in the index manually. And the record numbers show up like this in the index. They're somewhat alphabetical. All the P's come before all the R's, and R's come before the S's. However, within the P's, within the R's, within the S's, they're not alphabetical. They are by record number. So off on the left is the record number. You find the record number, go to the page, and select one of those, not select, but blow it up so that you can read the record. You can also download the records too. We'll talk about translating these records in a few slides later. Family Search is another place. In fact, at first, before Genealogy and Matriki was online, I was using Family Search as my main research for Polish records. Hold on a second. Losing my voice. Okay. Now, on Family Search, there are index record section and there's digital films. The index record has not changed in the last 15 years. All of these collections really haven't been increased. Well, it says the last one was in 2013. But they are searchable by name. And they're mostly for Galicia. Not the German partition, not the Russian partition. To find the records for the German and the Russian partitions, you have to use the catalog. And you can use a film number, which you would have gotten from another record that was indexed on another website, or you can use place names. Well, since a lot of Polish records were not indexed when I first started doing Polish genealogy, I was using place names a lot. And for my grandmother, for Andrzejewicz, this is what came up. The records available, I can choose from church records, genealogy, or Jewish records. Since she was Catholic, church records was my selection. And today they're online. Except if I try to do it from home, this is what I get. Yeah, I have to go to a family history center or an affiliate library to view those records. Once I'm at a family history center or an affiliate library, and usually I use an affiliate library because I have two within 5 to 10 minutes of my house, I can get this. Now I have to browse through those. I don't have to go page by page. I can jump because of the age of the records. But I can find the records within these images. However, Family Search is having a technical problem using their place name tab at this point in time. They did a revision to their website, and the church records don't show up in their place name search results anymore. Hopefully they'll change that and they'll recognize what they did. But I found a workaround. You can use the title tab. Let's go back. I use my cursor. See, here's place, surname, title. Initially, I was using place. Today, I would be using the title to find my grandmother's records. Just to show you, I put in country, So it'll be Poland, church records, and then the place name. In my particular case, I'm looking for Andrzejwo. And the results come up with, I don't have those genealogies, but I have Roman Catholic church records and Jewish congregation church records. Basically the same results that I was looking at before. Just have to not use place names anymore, but you use the place name in the title. So, digital image at the center. Most records are found by using films, place names, or title search to find what digital images. Some images can be viewed at home. That's true, but not all. In fact, very few. Most images can be viewed at the family search centers or affiliate libraries. Where are those places? Well, if you haven't visited any lately, or if you have never visited, you can find the nearest one by going to the family search homepage, and up at the top, there's a little teardrop with that arrow is pointing to. Here, I've blown it up, that little teardrop. Click on that, you'll get a map of the world. There's a search box where you can put in zip code or a name place like Appleton, Wisconsin. And I've blown up the map so that it shows that you have 3 very close to you. On the map, you'll see green colored little teardrops and orange brown colored teardrops. The orange brown are covered for are balloons for libraries, and the green ones are family history centers. The ones that I've detailed is the Appleton Public Library, where you're at, is one of them. Another library is the Elisha Smith Public Library in Menasha. And then the Appleton Family Center, which is in Appleton also. But I usually try to go to a library. The reason being is not just because they're close by and that the closest family center for me is about 5 miles away, but the hours. The Appleton Family History Center only opens on Tuesday morning, 9 to 1, and Wednesday evening, 6 to 8. Where at the Appleton Library, you have many, many, many more hours to go to. More hours open, and all you have to do is get in the door. And in fact, in some cases, I can use my laptop outside of my library in the parking lot. So when they're not open, I can also go there, which I did a couple of times during COVID. Another good place to find Polish resources is pgsa.org, which is Polish Genealogical Society of America. It's Chicago-based, but, and I'm guilty of starting this idea, they have a wonderful database of links to Polish databases. They do have some records of their own that they've indexed. And for for 3 of the Chicago Polish churches, they have excellent indexed records that basically are nowhere else. But they have over 50 databases links on their website using surname database tab and the research sources tab. This is good. The links also include Geneteka and Matriki, but they also include regional resources that are not covered in other places. Geneteka and Matriki basically cover all of Poland, but they haven't gotten around to indexing or digitizing all of the records. Whereas some of the regional Polish genealogical societies have databases that will cover that. This is one place to look for the Poznan Marriage Project, which is an excellent site if your family came from the Poznan or German partition. That marriage index are for couples that were married in Poland or in the Poznan province, and it covers all of 1800s, which is when a lot of the immigrants from the Polish partition came. And they came over as families or couples. Whereas the later immigration from the Austrian and the Polish and the Russian sectors, most of those came over as single women or single men. But from the German partition, just without telling you the history, most of those immigrants came over as families, meaning they were married, the parents were married in Poland, and their marriage is probably recorded on the Poznan Marriage Project. The Poznan Marriage Project actually tells you the parish where they were married. And from the marriage record, you can get where they were born. So learn to use the databases that PGSA has links to. We can't go into details, but we need to move on. We're running out of time. Now, you're going to find records in Polish, some in German, but mostly Polish, Latin, and if you came from the Russian partition from 1868 to about 1915, they'll be in Russian. But you need to try to translate them. Why? Because it'll improve your comfort zone when you're looking for Polish records. It'll speed up. You'll improve your speed if you keep trying to, because you'll recognize different terminology on those records faster. So you'll be able to determine, is this for my family? Is it not? And it'll reduce the number of false family records to analyze quickly. And this is true even if you do not learn Polish, Latin, or Russian. I don't read Polish, I don't read Latin, and I definitely don't read Russian, even though most of my Polish records are in Russian. I've learned workarounds to identify the records that belong to my family. Now, the formats. The records from Polish Russia are generally the narratives that we were looking at. From 1968 on, or before 1868, they were in Polish. After about 1915, they also were in Polish. But between that, from 1868 on, the Russian Tsar decreed that they will be in Russian and they will use the Cyrillic alphabet. To me, the Cyrillic alphabet looks like scribble, but there are ways to work around it. We'll talk about it in a minute. Prussia, they're usually in columns, although the early records may be in narratives, and most of them are in Polish or Latin. It's about 50-50. A few are in German, especially some of the early ones. Galicia, which is the Austrian partition, they started record keeping about 1790 using columns, and generally almost 100% I've found are in Latin. Now, the narratives, don't be intimidated because of all those words and all those handwriting problems that you have reading the records. It's kind of boilerplate. There is a format. It's just not freehand by the priest. He follows a script of how he puts the information in there. Up in the upper left-hand corner, I would start because that's the village where the birth was. You may be looking at a record that has the right surname, but if it's not from the right village, it's not, it may be for distant family members, but it's not the immediate family you're probably researching at the time. The first red box or the first name that you'll see is probably the father. These are birth records. The next two names are witnesses. The father brings the story that is being told by the birth register is that the father is bringing the child to the priest for baptism. These two are witnesses to say he was born to this father and the mother. The next name, the fourth name in the list, would be the name of the mother. I've highlighted the child's name in blue, and then the next two names would be the godparents. That's all you need to know to identify who the record is for, whether it's your family or not. In Polish, it's very easy because you're looking at names. In Russian, where a lot of these records I looked at came from, the Polish priest put the names, those names that you see, in parentheses. So he had to write it in Russian, but there's, after the Russian name, there's a line, then the name in Polish, and then the line ending that little translation. So most priests did that on Russian records. Occasionally they didn't, but most of them did. So that is one workaround to identify the record is for my family. Another book to help you translate or understand the narrative records in Polish is this book by Judith Franzen. It's available on Ancestry. It's about $35, $40. And she says she doesn't speak Polish, and she doesn't speak or write Polish just like I do. She knows a little bit more than I do, though. She's written a book, and it breaks down that format of the different types of records: birth, marriage, and death. Each section, she gives various variations of what's being said there. So you go to the section and you just look for the phrasing, both on the record that you see on the record in the book, so that you know what the English translation is. It's tedious, so I don't suggest you trying to translate everything, but sometimes you need to know a little bit more about that record and the words in it so that you can find out a little bit more of your Polish family history. It's just not names and dates. There's other information in there, such as whether they were a landowner, whether they were a farmer, whether they were, what occupation they were. Briefly, this is one of the narratives that there's a translation there. This is a marriage record for Pavel or Paul Himilevsky and Balbina. And the Balbina's last name from my family history is Przyczko or Przyczki. So you can see that they're describing this happened in Andrzejewo, the marriage, on this date. Witnesses are Jan Himilevsky and Jacob Kultubowski. Gives their ages and where they live. Then it talks about Paul, and he's a bachelor farmer from the village of Przali, where he was born, to the married couple of Franzik and Mariana Abruzka. Abruzka is the maiden name of the wife. Himilevsky is assumed for Frank's name, surname. Then it talks about he's marrying Balbina, the daughter of Jan and Christina, et cetera, et cetera. But you can see there's a story in there, and that's how the narratives are, whether they're birth, marriage, or death. Column format is much easier, and in this particular case, this is from the Austrian partition, and guess what? It's in Latin. Why do I say that right away? Because honest Domini, been to too many Catholic masses. So I immediately could see that that's Latin. But more importantly, the column headings are also in Latin and they're printed. So you don't have to decipher handwriting in the columns to know what the column name is for. And these are death records for 1918. And the second column is the month, then the date, where he died, the name of the person, and his age. And then on the second page, you can see another list of names. Those are his parents' names. But all of those other columns has a lot of information in them that you still need to decipher, but they're easy because you know what the column is, and then you can look up the term using translators, many of which are in genealogical word lists, which I'll mention in a second. The handwriting is one of the major problems with the records that you're going to look at. Most of them are using German type script. So in the columns that you'll see, there is the Roman print that we're used to, the German type, and then the German handwritten, which are different than our cursive. Now look at this little graph table. The first line covers the letters F, H, J, S, and T. The F looks like an H in the cursive that I grew up writing. The H is not an H. It looks more like an F also. So a lot of mistakes are made by misinterpreting the H, which I was guilty of. The J looks like a J, but the S and the T, I have no idea what those letters mean when I first looked at them. Knowing now, I can see S and T. Look at the last line, the E and the N. The block for the E looks like an N, and the block for the N looks like a U. So have that German script graph, excuse me, that available when you're trying to interpret a German script. And this is also on passenger manifest that you find. I find this very helpful also. And another thing, you don't have to understand the Polish alphabet other than how it is ordered. It does have extra letters with diacriticals above or through them or under them. You don't have to understand the name. You don't have to remember the names of the diacriticals. All you have to remember is that sometimes when lists are put in alphabetical order, if the first letter has a diacritical in it, it may be at the end, like the L. The two L's that you look at, one has a line through it. One has the diacritical in it. You may see the name of the village that you're looking for may have a diacritical as the first letter. If you don't see it in the list as you go through it alphabetically, keep going. It may have all the diacriticals at the end of the L's. Some books that have good word lists in the Polish in their words has 4 different volumes. One's in for Polish words, Polish records, one's for Latin, one's for German, and one's for Russian. Great word lists in those books. Use an old dictionary. New dictionaries don't really do justice to the words change over the time. I was trying to do German records, and I bought a new dictionary, and it was basically worthless. This circa 1900 Polish English dictionary, which I believe my grandfather had, proved very useful in helping me. Okay, word lists. Family Search has a great library of genealogical word lists that genealogists have put together to help them as cheat sheets maneuver and decipher Polish records. In the research wiki page search box, just type in word list, not plural, word list, and you'll get a good long list of word lists that Family Search has put together. Here's an example, one for Polish. The Polish words are alphabetically on the left, and notice that they have the diacriticals listed mixed in with the regular letters in this particular case, and then the English translation next to it. So learn to be comfortable using these lists. Not all the words that you'll encounter are on them, but most of the important ones are. I use them I use them a lot for dates. Remember to identify the language before you try to get into the record itself. Using the correct word list will help you speed through it. Some special notes for Russian. Remember, I told you I have workarounds, and most of my records are not most, many of my records that I'm looking at are in Russian. So before I attack my Russian records, before I started looking for the Russian records, I have I need to translate using Google Translate from English to Russian or from Polish to Russian, the given name and the surname that I'm looking for, the name of the village, and the parish town. The given name and the surname will help me maneuver through the indexes for those records, which will be in Russian. And then the village name where they were born or where they died will be in that upper left hand, or will be up in the left or right hand corner of the record. I need to know that. And then the parish town, I also need to know. It'll be in Cyrillic, and the Google translation will be in Cyrillic. And that's the key help here. So do that first before you try to attack a Russian, search for any Russian records. I just show this just for the effect because you can see that the Cyrillic alphabet is very different, and the mix, you need to know the order, because the C, what letter looks like a C, is not the third letter of the alphabet, or even the fourth. It's in the middle. So learn to recognize those writing, and so that you can look at the index in proper order. Here's an example of I'm starting to use AI, artificial intelligence, to aid the translation. I'm using Microsoft Copilot, but ChatGPT, Gemini, and Transcribus, I have friends using those with reasonable results. The strategy is to not have the AI app translate the record, but to give a transcription in whatever language it is, and then translate the transcription. The limitations are, it just depends on how sharp the handwriting is. If it's scribble, it's scribble, and it's going to come out garbage. But AI over time has gotten better in the short time I'm using it. Here's a record. It's a death record. It's relatively clear, sharp. I was able to get this translation out of it, or transcription. And from the transcription, I said to the AI app, translate this record from Polish to English. And although it's not perfect, it did give me a very good translation of what that record is all about. So just try it. I have a few reasonable successes so far. There are some mix where half the translation is okay and the other half is meaningless, and then others are just totally meaningless. But there's no harm in trying. It's going to get better. Facebook groups. There's one Facebook group called Genealogical Translations. This is a group of people that want to help. They're volunteers. It's a free service. They limit one document per day, but you have to allow at least 48 hours for results. Most languages are done. You have to join the group before you can upload a result. I've done it twice. I came back with a good translation of one, and I think the first one got lost. Again, back to Polish Genealogical Society of America, PGSAO. Under their research sources, down at the bottom, they do have a link to a list of translators that will help. They're professionals, so they'll expect payment, but it's another resource for you to look into. Keep going on your education, either videos or joining a Polish Genealogical Society. Most of the Polish Genealogical Societies offer virtual meetings, which means just like this for some of you, you don't have to be there. You don't have to be in person. And that is important because maybe you're in the Chicago area, but your ancestors came over and lived and died over in the Northeast. There's a Northeastern group that you should join to bounce off where you should be looking for records for your family there. The Family Search does have videos that are very helpful, just like our webinar. And Polish Genealogical Societies, there's one in Chicago, Detroit, Connecticut, and a Northeastern one also. And then I listed a website where they list the contact information for all these groups. There have been other groups, like there used to be one in California, but I don't think they're active anymore. I think there was one in Texas, but I don't think they're active anymore. Another suggestion is on the PGSA homepage, way down at the bottom, you can subscribe to a monthly genealogical notebook. It's free, doesn't cost you anything, but that monthly newsletter gives you some very helpful information on what's going on and articles and webinars and databases that have just come online. So it's very helpful. It's free. And just one email a month. And that's all they use it for. So recent trends, MyHeritage is used by more Eastern Europeans, and I have found more connections on MyHeritage. But Ancestry is coming along now too. They are dipping their efforts into Ancestry occasionally, but most of Eastern Europe do use MyHeritage. DNA sources the same way, MyHeritage versus Ancestry or Family Tree DNA. Although they are using Ancestry DNA a little bit and 23andMe, but generally MyHeritage first, Ancestry second. And why genealogists in Poland are seeking to exchange relatives over here in the U.S. They want to know what happened to the relatives, just like I want to know what happened to the descendants of all the branches in my family tree in Poland. I keep pointing, here's a family tree. It's not a family history. If you want to exchange information with your family in Poland, you need to have your notes organized, not just a tree, not just a family group. You need to know the information in a written format to exchange information better. I just use bullet points most of the time, just telling them the records, but yeah, I can fill in additional information after that. Things to do: collect, just a summary, collect the names, understand the border changes between 1795 and 1919, find the location of the maps of the place names on a map, find records using online searches, sites, digital images, and Polish archives. Attempt to translate the records. Believe me, attempting, you don't have to do it all, but just sorting through that will help you speed up your research and give you a comfort level than throwing up your arms, and continue building your skills through education. The most important thing is save your family stories and enjoy your Polish heritage. Most of what I've covered today is covered in my book, Polish Genealogy. If you're delving into Polish heritage stories, you might find these two books very helpful. And this is how I would write a family history. And I also have a new book on organizing genealogy. That's all I got. Katie, can you open it up for questions?
Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. I figured it out. All right. Does anybody in person have any questions for us?
So I have one. Go ahead. So I have lots of family history, names, birth towns, etc., all in German, and it's part of the Germany that is now Poland. So my question is, where can I go to find potentially more detailed history? So for example, all the German records, where did they go at the end of either World War I or the end of World War II? Because my grandfather, where he was born, ceded to Poland after World War I, and then where my mother was born is now Poland after World War II. So what I'm trying to figure out is where I can go to potentially get some more information, potentially addresses, potentially my grandfather's military duty and things like that. So what's the best place to go for something like that?
All over the place. I'm sorry, but you'll find some labeled as German and some of the records will be in Polish archives.
Okay.
Geneteka and Matriki are developing databases. Some of their work has indexed and digitized records for that area.
Okay.
But there's not a lot of volunteers there.
Yeah.
With my Russian ancestors, I've been lucky in the two provinces that are associated with my Russian partition ancestors. I've had a ton of volunteers go in there and develop the record, so I'm kind of spoiled. But I know for German, it's all over the map. You're going to have to use Geneteka and Matriki first, then you'll need to also look at the Posnan Marriage Project. And then you'll probably also need to dive into the PGSA links to find regional databases that fit where your ancestors came from. And then for your military records, actually on Ancestry, they do have military records indexed as far as when they served and where they served, or at least the town where they enlisted, and also whether they died or not, and also their rank.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I have some of that information from my grandfather's, he wrote down his life course. And
Okay.
I'm now, what I'm really trying to figure out is where do I go now to try to get exactly what his group did? Because he was conscripted in 1939 and wounded in 41.
Okay. The records that I was referring to were basically World War One.
Got it.
So if he was in the German army during World War II, if you have his unit, you should just do a Google search of the unit, and you might find some descriptions of that it probably will be in German, but they'll probably be typed, which are easier to translate using online translators.
Okay.
As far as his family going backwards, that will probably put you into the early 1900s.
Yep.
And if you can get into the 1800s, I'm pretty sure that you can start using all those other websites.
Thank you.
All right, your question.
So thank you for the handout that we got out. Was given out. I assume you had part of that invested in your time. However, is a copy of the presentation you had available?
Yeah, so we did record it and I will post it on our library's YouTube channel on Monday.
On Monday?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else in person have any questions? Go ahead.
So I understand how my family pronounces the name, or my grandparents pronounced their family name, but I don't know how it's spelled. Are there online tools that go from, hey, I could read something into a recording and it turns back and gives me what the suggested Polish spelling would be?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Going back to that, when I was talking about names, when I was talking about Jubek and Jubert, I basically used a cousin who lives in a Polish cousin who was born in Poland and lives in Liverpool now, to help me verify that I was correct in that. But it's more Google Translate you can type in something in a language and it will pronounce it for you. But that may not give you the right spelling.
I wonder if the Chat GPT or
I would say they may be closer today. To play around with Chat GPT or one of the other AI apps, because one might be better than the other for that. They're all not the same, and they leapfrog over one another. So try them all.
Any other questions from our online or our in-person folks? Great. Let's tackle some of these online questions. Someone's wondering, what happens if you're dealing with Jewish ancestors? Do you have any resources, or would you find them in some of the resources you covered today?
Yeah, no. Some of them, some Jewish records are in the Catholic records. They're also on, if you know the town for the searching for the Jewish records are the same as searching for Polish records. You need to know where they were born or where the records are. You know, what synagogue or what town they're in. Because you notice that for Andrzej, they did offer Jewish church records available. There was one database for Jewish records. But to give you a more complete answer, and this isn't a marketing thing, this is just answering your question. I just published a book on Jewish genealogy. And I mean like 2 days ago. It is available on Ancestry. And the resources to dig into it at first, the main one would be Jewish Gen, Jewish with GEN.org. That's the first step. Once you know where they're from, you cannot look at any European records until you know where they are from. After you know where they're from, then you can start using looking for European records on Jewish Gen. And there's other sites, but the Jewish Gen would be the main site to start with. And there's a free section, and then there's one that costs $100 for the year. It's a $100 donation. And the main thing that the $100 donation gives you is more filters. You can limit your search a little bit more to narrow in a little bit further. But there are other sources. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. But Jewish Gen, I know it would be the first. Like Genealogy was the first place I would say go for Polish genealogy. Jewish Gen would be the first database I would go looking for European Jewish records.
Someone's
that answers the question.
Someone's also wondering about Lutheran records, and I think some of your examples were Catholic records. Are those also on some of those ones that you would find?
Genealogy does include Lutheran records in their indexing, but also in Poland, the Lutheran would be evangelical. That would be the term used in Europe for most Protestant records. And Family Search does have databases for evangelical records, as they do for Jewish and for Catholic. You just have to look at the databases by town where they were created and see what's available.
Someone also mentioned Archeon, which is more of a German resource, but have you experienced finding any Polish records on Archeon as well?
No. There may be some, but I doubt it. The reason I say that is that it's a relatively new website. And the German areas that are now part of Poland, or the German type records that were part of the German partition, would probably be in the Polish archives rather than the German archives. They would be in the German archives if they were created before World War II. I'm sorry, I should have stated that first. Because they weren't part of Poland at the time. Before World War II, they were part of Germany. So if they were part of the German provinces that were given to Poland at the end of World War II, those records would be in the German archives. But the German partition would be in Polish archives.
Right. What about any cemetery databases? Are there any cemetery databases for Polish cemeteries?
Actually, on Jewish Din there is. And I think there are one from Poland, but I'm not sure. I cannot remember for sure. Look on any databases on Polish Genealogical Society of America, Polish PGSA.org. Look at those two tabs to see if there's any cemetery records there. If there are, they're probably listed there.
All right. Next question. Is it ever possible to get an address for a Polish ancestor, or is basically the city or that town name the best they're ever going to go get?
If it was a small village or even a parish town of only a few thousand, they probably didn't have addresses. Today, of course, living relatives, they do have addresses. But it's difficult to get pictures of where they lived, even if the building is still standing, because they didn't really have a way of addressing things. I'm relying on a cousin to tell me exactly where my grandmother grew up, what building. There was only 7 houses. So what building was her family's? And she told me that, but I can't get a picture of it using Google Maps because the roads don't go through there. But anyway, if it was in a large city, yes, there's city directories that are available. Again, look at the list on pgsa.org to see if they have a listing or there's a website for them. I'm not sure. All of my relatives came from small villages.
All right. What about census records? Did Poland do any censuses throughout the years?
There was one around the turn of the 1700s, or 1800s, early 1800s, late 1700s. There was one that was very helpful for me, but I found it by accident. So there's not a website that covers it. They are in the Polish National Archives. I just haven't gone searching for them, but I know they're there. So learn to use the Polish National Archives and learn the Polish word for census.
The next question, when entering the location in your family trees, what location should you enter since, all the border changes? Should we put Poland? Should we put Germany? Should we put Russia or Prussia? What's your suggestion on that?
If it was somebody that lived, how should I say it? If they were born before 1772, I would put Poland. If they married or after 1795 in the Russian partition, I would put Polish Russia. If they died within the partition, if they were born, married, or died during the partition, I would put that double name, either Polish Germany, Polish Austria, or Polish Russia. If they were born, married, or died outside of that range, I would put Poland. It tells me an idea of where just the political side of it. If you know the land was in Poland, it's Poland really, but that's just my take on it. I just want to know the time frame, but it's up to the person. I know in names, yeah, I have the same sort of question. What name do I give them if they changed it slightly or they Americanized their name? Uh, if the well, and first names is a good example. I have a great grandfather that his English given name was Alexander. He never left Poland, so I put the Polish spelling of his first name in all things that I write about him. My grandfather, who immigrated, I still use either Steve or John when I'm writing about him, even though his Polish name is quite different. It's just a way that I use the names, and it's not. It's what you'll see basically on the records, and for an immigrant, you'll see it both ways, so you can flip a coin. Any other questions?
Our last one, this person says they have basically zero information on their grandfather. They don't even know where he was born or the exact year. So they're kind of looking for a starting point. They have a copy of his draft card and a marriage certificate, and they were told that he came over on a deceased man's paperwork, but they don't know that person's name. So do you have any suggestions on where they might be able to start to unravel this tale and find out more?
You start with the census records because you know their name on the census records, even though they came over using another name, and I might question that. You do know them by a certain name. You take that name and go back in the census records to gather information. The census records will have an estimate of their birth year. It may vary 1 or 2 years, but that'll be a decent estimate to know about when they were born. It'll also give you a record of where they lived, so you'll know you may get clues on where to look for additional information. It'll also say whether they were naturalized or not, and if they were naturalized, then now you'll know to go looking for their naturalization petition. The naturalization petition may or should give you when they came over and on what ship, and you can go looking on that record, the ship's record, for any names that might be your grandfather. And along the way, you collect town names, just like I was saying during the talk, so that you can point to an area in Poland where they came from. And then hopefully they didn't change their name from what they saw in Poland, minus all those variations I was talking about, names, so that you can look up their name in Poland and you can kind of jump over that they came over with a different name. I hope that helps.
We did have one more final question pop in while you were answering that one. They're wondering if you provide any research services or you have any recommendations for people looking to hire somebody to do their Polish genealogy instead.
That line that I was showing you in pgsa.org also have a place for researchers in Poland.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for all your information, all your help, wonderful suggestions. Hopefully it gave everybody some great resources to go dive into. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you next month on February 14th. Again, that's an in-person only at the library, where we're going to have Vicki Tobias talking about what to do with your personal archives and your genealogy research. So hope to see you then. Everyone take care.